Welcome to the Silent Hours Tales, where the darkness speaks. Beware what lurks in the shadows.
No one remembered the first scream. That was the strangest part. Cities always remembered how they fell, who ran first, who betrayed whom, who prayed and who begged, but no one could recall the first scream that night. It was as if the land itself swallowed the sound before it could exist. The ground trembled long before the people understood why. At first, it felt like distant thunder, a low vibration beneath the feet, subtle enough to be ignored. Then the vibration became a rhythm, slow, heavy, deliberate, like footsteps measured by something ancient that had all the time in the world. Elias stood on the eastern watchtower when the fog arrived. Fog was common near the valley, but this was different. It did not drift, it did not roll naturally with the wind. It moved backward, retreating inch by inch as if something behind it demanded space. The air grew cold, too cold for the season. Torches flickered violently, their flames bending away from the hills as though afraid. Elias tightened his grip on the spear, his breath turning visible. He had guarded these walls for 12 years, through wars and famine and riots, but his instincts had never screamed like this before. Then he saw them. At first, they were only shapes, tall silhouettes cutting through the thinning fog, but as the mist pulled away completely, the truth revealed itself in horrifying clarity. They marched in lines, perfect lines, not rushing, not hesitating. Each step landed with a weight that cracked stone and sent dust rising into the air. They were massive, far taller than any man, broader than war horses. Their skin looked like cracked stone, gray and uneven, etched with scars and symbols burned deep into their flesh. Their eyes glowed red, not like fire, but like embers buried deep beneath ash. Each one carried a stone on its back, not rubble, not debris, massive, shaped blocks of ancient stone, carved and worn as if taken from forgotten temples. Some were chained, some were fused directly into flesh, as though the creature and the burden were one. Their mouths hung open in endless snarls, revealing broken teeth and dark throats, but they made no sound, no war cry, no roar, only the sound of marching. Elias felt his legs lock. Around him, other guards froze in silence. One dropped his spear, another whispered a prayer under his breath. No command was given because no command mattered anymore. When the lead creature reached the edge of the valley, it stopped, the largest of them all. Its skin was darker, nearly black, and the symbols carved into its body glowed faintly, as if remembering something old and painful. It raised its head slowly and looked directly at the city walls. And then it lifted its stone. The impact shattered the eastern gate like rotten wood. Stone exploded inward. Men were crushed before they could scream. The silence broke all at once, bells ringing, people shouting, mothers screaming for children. The stone bearers surged forward. They did not run, they walked, and the city broke around them. Arrows flew, they bounced off cracked skin. Swords struck, they shattered. Fire poured from the towers, but the flames only crawled across stone flesh and died. Elias ran. He did not remember deciding to run. His body moved on instinct alone, weaving through collapsing streets and choking dust. Buildings fell as if struck by invisible giants. A stone-bearer reached down and lifted a man by the leg, smashing him into the ground again and again until nothing recognizable remained. Another tore a tower apart with his bare hands, stones raining like hail. Elias ducked into an old temple at the heart of the city, ancient, forgotten, the kind no one prayed in anymore. He slipped beneath a collapsed pillar as the ceiling cracked above him. The sounds outside were unbearable, stone grinding against stone, deep growls vibrating through the earth, the screams of a city dying. Time lost meaning. It could have been minutes, it could have been hours. Then the sounds slowed. The destruction moved away. Elias dared to look through the cracks in the rubble. One of them stood outside the temple, closer than any had been before. Its massive chest rose and fell slowly. It tilted its head, sniffing the air like a beast. Step by step, it approached the broken doorway. Elias's heart pounded so hard he was sure it could be heard. The creature crouched, its massive form lowering, red eyes scanning the darkness. Their eyes met. For a single heartbeat, Elias saw something impossible. Fear. Not rage, not hunger. Fear. The creature flinched back as if burned. A sound echoed from the hills. A horn. Low, ancient, powerful. The creature froze. Slowly it stood. Around the city, Elias heard movement changing direction. The stone bearers turned away as one, without urgency, without emotion. They marched back into the fog, stones still on their backs, leaving the city broken and burning behind them. By dawn, silence returned. What remained was not a city. It was a grave. Survivors crawled from hiding places, faces pale, eyes hollow. No one celebrated survival. No one spoke of victory. They all knew this was not an attack. It was a warning. Elias returned to the temple later that day. Beneath the rubble, he found something the city had forgotten. Carvings beneath the floor. Old, older than the walls, older than memory. Figures etched into stone, men binding giants, carving symbols into flesh, forcing massive beings to carry stones as punishment. At the center of the carving was a single line, written in a language that made Elias's blood run cold even before he understood it. They carried our sins. One day they will return them. That night, the ground trembled again, and this time the horn did not sound.
Mourning did not bring relief. It only revealed the scale of what had been lost. The city no longer had streets, only wounds carved into the earth. Smoke rose from shattered homes, drifting upward in thin, lifeless columns. Survivors moved like ghosts, their eyes unfocused, their hands shaking as they searched for names that would never be answered. Elias walked among them, stepping over broken stone and bodies half buried beneath rubble, each breath heavier than the last. The silence was worse than the screams had been. Silence meant memory, and memory meant fear. The horn had not sounded again. That truth settled into Elias's mind like a poison. Whatever had called the stone bearers back was either gone, broken, or no longer willing to intervene. That night, the tremors returned, faint but steady, like a distant heartbeat beneath the soil. The bearers were still moving somewhere beyond the hills, waiting. Elias returned to the ruined temple before dusk. The carvings beneath the floor haunted him. He cleared debris with trembling hands, uncovering more symbols, more figures etched into the stone. They told a story not of monsters, but of men, kings and priests standing over kneeling giants, carving runes into their flesh, chaining stones to their backs. The giants' faces were not enraged in the carvings. They were broken, obedient, cursed. An old man found Elias there, one of the few elders who still lived, his back bent, his voice brittle with age. "You saw them," the man said quietly. It was not a question. "Then you must know. They are not here to conquer. They are here to remember." The elder told Elias a story passed down in whispers, a story never written because it was forbidden. Long before the cities, before the walls, before kings, there was a war that nearly destroyed the world. Men had been losing, so they created something stronger, something that could not tire. Warriors fused with stone, bound by rituals older than language. They were made to carry the weight of cities they destroyed, punishment and control bound together. When the war ended, the giants were buried beneath mountains, forgotten but not freed. But curses don't fade, they wait. That night, Elias dreamed again. He stood in endless darkness, surrounded by towering figures frozen in place, stones fused to their backs. Red eyes opened one by one. He felt their pain, not as memory, but as hunger. Hunger for release, hunger for judgment. When he woke, the tremors were stronger. Cracks spread across the ground outside the city like veins. Elias knew staying meant death. The carving spoke of answers hidden where the bearers were first bound, in the northern mountains where the fog never lifted. At dawn, he left the ruins behind, traveling alone toward the land no one returned from. The journey was slow. The earth grew darker, the sky dimmer, as if the world itself thinned the farther north he traveled. Villages lay abandoned, walls crushed inward as though something had passed through without resistance. Always the same signs: deep footprints, shattered stone, silence. On the fourth night, Elias heard them clearly, not footsteps, voices, low, deep, echoing beneath the ground. He pressed his ear to the soil and felt vibrations move through his bones. They were speaking to each other in a language that was not sound, but pressure, memory, pain. He understood then. The stone bearers were not mindless. They were awake. By the time Elias reached the mountains, the fog was thick enough to choke the air. Shapes moved within it, massive and slow. A fortress emerged from the stone itself, black and ancient, its walls etched with the same symbols Elias had seen beneath the temple. This was where it had begun. This was where the chains were forged. Inside, the air pulsed. The walls felt alive beneath his touch. At the heart of the fortress stood a massive horn, cracked but intact, resting on a stone altar. As Elias approached, the ground shook violently. The fog parted. The stone bearers emerged, dozens, then hundreds, surrounding the fortress in silence. The largest among them stepped forward, its symbols burning red. It knelt, and then it spoke. "We carried your cities," its voice like mountains grinding together. "We carried your wars. We carried your sins. And now we return them." The horn cracked. A deep fracture split its surface. Elias realized the truth too late. The horn was never control. It was restraint, and restraint was failing. The ground roared as the chains broke. The stone bearers stood tall, no longer marching, but choosing. Their eyes burned brighter as they turned south, toward the last remaining cities of men. The march was about to begin again. The mountains trembled as the stone bearers turned away from the fortress. Elias stood frozen before the shattered horn, its fragments crumbling into dust at his feet. The silence that followed was heavier than any roar. He felt it then, an unbearable pressure in the air, as if the world itself had inhaled and was holding its breath. The restraint was gone. Whatever balance once existed between men and the cursed giants had finally collapsed. The bearers did not rush. That was the most terrifying part. They moved with certainty, not rage. Each step they took cracked the mountainside, sending avalanches of stone cascading into the valleys below. Elias watched them descend, their massive forms slowly disappearing into the fog, heading south, toward the last untouched lands, the final cities that still believed their walls meant safety. Elias fell to his knees. The carvings had warned of this moment, but no warning could prepare a man to witness the end of an age. The fortress around him groaned, ancient stones shifting as if responding to the bearer's awakening. He realized the place was not merely a prison, it was a wound in the world, a scar left by the ritual that had bound living beings into tools of war. As night fell, Elias felt something change inside himself, a pull. Not physical, but deep within his chest and skull.
Images flooded his mind, visions not his own. He saw the bearers as they once were, men tall and proud, warriors chosen and betrayed. He felt their pain as symbols were carved into their flesh, their screams swallowed by ritual chants. He felt the weight of the stones chained to their backs, the endless marching, the cities they destroyed against their will. These were not memories shown to frighten him, they were memories being shared. "They remember you," a voice whispered behind him. Elias spun. A woman stood in the shadows of the fortress, her eyes glowing faintly with the same red embers he had seen in the bearers. She introduced herself as Mara, one of the bound, humans marked by the old rituals, descendants of those who once controlled the giants. "We feel them awaken," she said. "When the bearers move, so do we. The curse echoes through blood." Mara explained what the carvings did not. The ritual that created the stone bearers required anchors, living witnesses bound to the curse to ensure obedience. Those anchors never truly died. They passed the mark through generations, waiting, listening, feeling every step the giants took beneath the earth. Now, with the horn broken, the anchors were screaming. Together, Elias and Mara followed the tremors south. Villages fell before they could even flee. Walls collapsed inward as if crushed by invisible hands. The bearers no longer stopped at cities alone. They erased roads, bridges, symbols of civilization itself. Men fought and died. Prayers went unanswered. Firestorms lit the horizon, painting the fog red with ash. During one night march, Elias witnessed something that broke him completely. A stone bearer stopped at the ruins of a small village. It knelt and carefully removed the stone from its back, placing it gently beside a collapsed home. Then it pressed its massive forehead to the ground and remained there, unmoving. Elias understood. This place had once belonged to the man the bearer used to be. This was not conquest, it was mourning. The visions grew stronger. He could hear their thoughts now, not words but intent, judgment, balance, return. The bearers were not destroying randomly. They were retracing old scars, places where their suffering began. Cities built atop mass graves, temples erected on blood-soaked ground. Humanity had built its future on the backs of the cursed, and now the weight was being returned. At the edge of the final kingdom, the bearers stopped. Hundreds of them stood in silence, facing towering walls filled with soldiers who already knew resistance was meaningless. The largest bearer stepped forward, the one who had spoken before. Its symbols burned brighter than ever. The air warped around it. "The burden must be answered," it said, its voice shaking the sky. "Our one will carry what we carried, or all will fall." Elias felt the pull tighten around his soul. The visions clarified. The ritual could be undone, but not erased. The curse demanded balance. A single bearer could replace the many, a willing sacrifice, not bound by chains, bound by choice. "If no one answers, there will be no dawn," Mara whispered, terror and understanding colliding in her eyes. The ground split open beneath the army's feet. Stone rose like waves. The final march was moments away. Elias stepped forward, his heart pounding, every instinct screaming for him to stop. But he understood now. The bearers were not monsters, they were mirrors, and humanity was staring at its own reflection. He raised his voice, not in command, not in prayer, but in surrender. "I will carry it." The world seemed to pause. The bearers turned as one. And for the first time since the curse was born, they listened. Silence fell across the valley like a held breath. Hundreds of stone bearers stood unmoving, their red eyes dimming slightly as Elias stepped forward, alone. The armies behind the walls watched in disbelief, unable to understand why the giants had stopped, why the earth itself seemed to wait. Mara felt it too, the pressure easing for the first time since the horn shattered. The curse had heard a willing voice. The largest bearer lowered itself, its massive knees cracking the stone beneath them. "Choice," it said, the word grinding through the air like a landslide. Then the weight must be whole. The symbols across its body flared, and the ground split open before Elias, revealing a chamber older than the mountains themselves. Stone stairs descended into darkness that pulsed with a slow, ancient rhythm, like a heart buried beneath the world. Elias descended without looking back. Each step carried the echo of countless marches. The air grew heavier, denser, pressing against his chest. At the chamber's center stood a monolith, etched with every symbol he had seen, and many he had not. Around it lay the remnants of chains, shattered and rusted, half fused into the floor. This was where the burden had been divided. This was where it would be made whole again. Mara followed to the threshold, but could go no farther. The anchors burned in her blood, warning her that to cross would mean dissolution. "If you do this," she called out, voice breaking, "there is no return." Elias did not answer. He placed his hand upon the monolith. The stone was warm, alive. Visions poured into him, not fragments now, but the totality of it. The forging of the bearers, the betrayal, the first march, the centuries of silence beneath mountains, the endless carrying. He felt their knees buckle, their backs crack, their voices stolen. And beneath it all, a simple truth. The curse endured because it was unfinished. Punishment without release. Weight without end. Elias spoke, not with his mouth, but with his will. Let it end. The monolith split with a sound like the world tearing cloth. Light, pale, and heavy poured out, wrapping Elias in bands of force. The symbols arose from the stone and carved themselves into his skin, burning without flame. He screamed then, finally, as his bones hardened and his breath slowed. His heartbeat stretched into something vast and patient. Above, the bearers began to change. One by one, they lifted the stones from their backs. The ground shook as the burdens were set down, not hurled, not discarded, but placed with reverence. Cracks spread across their stone flesh as the symbols dimmed. Some fell to their knees, some bowed their heads. The largest bearer watched the chamber, eyes no longer burning, but deep and tired. Elias rose within the chamber, no longer fully man. Stone traced his veins, his skin cracked and reformed, stronger, darker. The weight came next, immeasurable, absolute, settling onto him not as a single block, but as the sum of all that had been carried before. Cities, wars, sins, memory. He staggered, then steadied. This burden was chosen, and choice made it bearable. The chamber sealed, the earth healed above it. Dawn broke, real dawn. The fog thinned and lifted from the valleys. The bearers stepped back, their forms shrinking, stones sloughing away like old scars. Where giants had stood, men remained, changed, aged, but free. Some wept, some knelt, some simply lay down and slept for the first time in centuries. Mara felt the anchors quiet within her. The screaming stopped. The curse released its grip on her blood. She looked toward the mountains and understood what had been done. One stood so the many could rest. Years passed, the world rebuilt, carefully this time. Temples were torn down and replaced with gardens. Cities were razed away from graves. Stories were told honestly, without erasing the cost. Travelers spoke of a mountain where the ground never trembled anymore, where a great stone figure stood unmoving, eyes dim but open, bearing a weight no other could see. Children were warned not with fear, but with truth. The world stands because someone chose to carry what we made. And deep beneath the stone skin, Elias listened. He did not sleep, he did not dream. He waited, patient and watchful, not for the world to fall again, but to ensure it would not. As long as the burden remained chosen, not forced, the march would never return.